Today let's talk about modularizing your configuration files. So this is my previous project I worked on in previous tutorials. We have our application configuration XML. I'll open it. So this XML somehow is able to load when we start our application. How does Studio know which XML file to load? And the answer is simple. If you look at your Mule deploy properties, you will see that Studio is pointing to your XML file, which is right here. This is how Mule will know which XML files to load. Because one of the things that you will realize quickly when you start development, if we create yet another configuration file, sample2xml, and you run your project, everything is deployed. Unfortunately, we don't have any flows in sample2, but it's loaded at this point. Everything is fine, no errors, nothing. If we open Mule deploy again, you will see that now we have two files, sample2xml and secure properties app.xml, which were added by Studio automatically. So then when you start your Mule project in Studio, that's how Mule knows which XML files to load. Now the point of this tutorial is how do we manage these configuration files. Now, as you can imagine, when you work on a really large project, the number of these XML configuration files will grow. And it's actually recommended to split your XML files into additional files when the content gets too big. So at this point, our XML file is rather small, but they get very often to very large sizes, so it's recommended to actually split them and group them by some kind of a category, some kind of a label. One of the things that I would recommend is group your configuration files in folders. We manage our regular files in folders, why not do it in Studio with our code? So if you create a new folder within main app, and let's call it, for example, customer. All customer related configuration files will go into customer. So we can create our configuration, call it customer sample. Now as you see, it doesn't add it to folder, so you can drag it into the folder. Now our workspace and app directory can look much cleaner, arranged into subfolders. For the sake of an example, let's add a flow. We'll use just regular logger, save it. We see the flow here, customer sample flow, good. Let's run. Everything is fine. If we look at Mule deploy again, you will see that config resources now contains customer/customer sample XML. Perfect. So now we can use subfolders within app to make our projects look a lot cleaner. Keep in mind that your project is just like one giant Spring configuration. When you start the project, all XML files that are listed in config resources will get appended into this one huge Spring configuration file, and that entire context will start. And that's why the names in your XML files need to be unique, and you can utilize Spring beans within your Mule, obviously since it's running within the Spring context, as long as you keep the names unique, because if you load them and there's name collision, you will see the exceptions. In order to add an external Spring configuration to your Mule project, for the sake of this, let's do Spring config. So this is a separate config. Let's go into XML view, and here I'll just use Spring control space, and you see I have Spring beans. Without Spring beans, I can reference import, and import can reference a resource on your class path. In my case, it's mySpring.xml. So as long as this mySpring.xml present on the class path, so it can be one of the jars as part of your dependencies, this file will get imported into one big Spring context. How do I reuse my flows across multiple projects? And this is how. You would put your reusable logic into those XML files, into configuration files, put them in a jar, and then reference that jar as dependency in your Maven POM XML file, in your Maven build. Using dependency, you would include those jars into your projects, as many as you wish. And all the XML configuration files within that jar you will be able to import. And once again, you will import them one by one. As in my case, if I just want this XML, I will only import that particular file. So your jar can have hundreds of XML configuration files, and you can only import the one that you actually need, or 2 or 3, or maybe all 100 of them. In part 2 of this tutorial, I will show how we can create those jars and how we can reference external XML configuration files from those jars within your Mulesoft projects, as well as address some known issues within Studio. When you import those external files, sometimes you get those red errors on your XML configurations saying that something is wrong, but in reality nothing is wrong, and I'll show you how to fix that.